Precious. Good morning, friends. You are going to code with me again today. Welcome back to our Code with Me episode 3. Alright, coder friends, let's start coding. Let's start with a very short, small encounter here. It's an office visit. This small encounter does not have really any codable or reportable conditions. The patient has hyperlipidemia and vitamin D deficiency, but these conditions are not reportable or do not suggest for my current project. So let's move on. Next chart. Let's see, what are the codes we are going to report for this encounter? So let's go to our assessment first. We always start at the assessment so that we can code those conditions that are really confirmed. So here, the patient has type 1 diabetes, hypertension, and hyperlipidemia. And the patient also has retinopathy. So since this is a type 1 diabetes, we are not going to code the long-term use of insulin, but we can combo code the type 1 diabetes and retinopathy. So to code that, let's index diabetes with retinopathy, and let's see if it is specified as to what kind of retinopathy. So there is no specificity if it is non-proliferative, proliferative, or with macular edema. So this will just give us a code of E10319. And then what are the other conditions? So the patient is in long-term current use of insulin. Since it is type 1, again, we are not going to report that one. Let's see what else. And the patient, in the assessment, it says that the patient has way back, long time ago, the patient had a respiratory failure that led to tracheostomy tube, but we have to make sure that that tube is still current and is still part of the patient's. So let's go to the physical exam, and here, yes, there is still tracheostomy. So to code that, we type status and then the type of ostomy, tracheostomy, and the code for that is Z93.0, and that risk adjust. So since it is in assessment, that is codable, and that is part also of one of the reportable conditions in my current project. Continue coding, and let's find some conditions right here and let's code them. So let's go first to the assessment. All right, what do we have in here? So the patient has, this is an office visit, and the patient had acute kidney injury. Since it is an office visit, we do not code AKI, but the patient has CKD, so we can code that one. And there is CKD, there is also diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So the specificity, the kidney disease that the patient has is unspecified. So if you combine, we are going to combo code the CKD and the diabetes. So to type that, you type diabetes with chronic kidney disease, and the code for that is E11.22, and that is reportable. My current project right now, CKD unspecified, is non-reportable. And there is also hypertension right here. Hypertension and CKD, we can combo code that one. Hypertension, you can type hypertension with kidney involvement, or with kidney involvement, and then the code for that is I12.9, but that one does not risk adjust. Let's see if there is a long-term use of insulin because the patient is diabetic. And as I can see here, there is no insulin use. Okay, but we can find in the past medical history that the patient has neuropathy. We can actually confirm, because neuropathy is a non-chronic condition. We need to find if there is a medication that supports the patient's neuropathy. And according here, I couldn't find any in the med, so we do not report diabetes with neuropathy. So the condition to be reported is only one, and that is E11.22. Alright, let's have our next chart. This chart is very small. I'm so lucky to have small charts in my queue. So the patient has lupus, and it is specified as SLE, or systemic lupus erythematosus, unspecified, and the code for that is M32.9. So to index that, we actually type lupus, and then next is systemic. When you reach systemic, there is also a C also, and it will lead you to the code for M32.9 for SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus unspecified. That is, the code for that is M32.9. And let's read more and find other conditions that are reportable in this chart. Okay, the patient has alopecia, and I believe that does not risk adjust, so we do not code that one. Okay, the patient does not have any other condition, so for this chart we only have to code one condition, which is the SLE. And let's see how many conditions does this patient have that are reportable. Okay, let's go first to our assessment. So here the patient had AKI, or acute renal failure, which is not reportable during the outpatient visit. The patient has hypertension. The patient has CKD. Oh no, the patient does not have CKD. He had acute renal failure, but he does not have CKD. Okay, let's continue reading. Okay, the patient actually has secondary hyperparathyroidism. To index that, we type hyperparathyroidism and then secondary. The code for that is N2581. Also, the patient has HFrEF, or systolic heart failure. Let's find in the problem list if this is chronic or not. And in the problem list, the patient has chronic systolic heart failure, and that is I50.22. Okay. Also, the patient has hypertension. So hypertension and heart failure, we can combo code that one by typing hypertension with heart failure, and the code for that is I11.0, and that is reportable. We have three conditions right here: secondary hyperparathyroidism, heart failure, and hypertension with heart failure. Let's move on to the next encounter. It says here that the patient has end-stage renal disease, and when we say end-stage, that is N18.6. To code that, we say disease, end-stage renal, N18.6. Okay, here also in the assessment, the patient has hypertension, the patient has secondary hyperparathyroidism, and the patient has systolic heart failure. When the CKD is being specified, and if it is end stage and 18.6, the combo code changes. For I13.0 for hypertensive heart and chronic kidney disease with heart failure and stage 1 to 4 CKD or unspecified CKD, that is I13.0. But if the patient has specified ESRD kidney failure, that will change. So to code that, we type hypertension and then cardiorenal and then with heart failure because the patient has systolic heart failure, and with stage 5 or ESRD. The code for that is I13.2. We will be having three codes right here: one for hypertensive CKD with heart failure, one for the ESRD, and one for the heart failure. And the heart failure is I50.20 because it is systolic heart failure. And also the patient has secondary hyperparathyroidism, that is N2581. So do we have any other conditions? There is none, and we can submit this one. So I have the same patient, the same condition, so I'm just gonna call them. Okay, friend, this is our last encounter to do today. Okay, so this is a hospital encounter. The patient has acute heart failure, that is I50.9, and the patient has hypertension, that is I11.0.